Ooh. Thank you. I'm Andrew, that's Matt.
Hello.
What do you guys all do in the industry? Do we have clinicians, admissions people, BD reps? No? Program owners, sober livings? Where do we all come from? Kind of all over the board, huh? I missed you three. Nonprofit. Perfect. Good crowd. So when Ashley asked me to come up and talk and actually serve on the board for the Family Recovery Foundation, it was really kind of a match made in heaven. And I've been through the treatment world in a lot of different roles and consistently saw families left behind. I think a lot of times we saw that maybe the family was seen as an obstacle or too much or too sick or too controlling, or the family was just way too much. And a lot of times they got very little other than go to Al-Anon. So I wanted to talk just some real practical resources. What can we do today to bring the family more into the recovery process? I'll start with a little bit of a story, and this is a story that's not unique. Anybody who's been in this industry for any length of time, this is a fairly typical story, right? We've got a 33-year-old man, history of some motocross industry injuries, and he's hooked on fentanyl, Oxycontin, kratom, Xanax, alcohol. He's got the whole polysubstance resume going on. By the time we get involved, we've got physical deterioration. He's expressing suicidal ideations, and we were able to get him committed to go to a detox and residential program. Now, this is important for this story. He signed full releases of information for his wife, his parents, her parents, and our team. Throughout, there was always an ROI available. Yet, throughout this course of 30, 35-ish days of detox to residential, the family's getting very little information from the center. The therapist calls with he's doing great, he's participating, everything's on track kind of updates, and that's about all the information this family's getting until it's time to step down to PHP. Now, he's in a program that has full continuum of care. They have all the resources. It's only natural. Step down our patients to the next level of care. Yet, it wasn't until just days before this step down was the first time the family heard anything other than he's doing great model client. So you can imagine their shock when the therapist starts recommending, we want to do some extended care. Now, ultimately, that man ended up discharging into an online evening IOP program and full-time work. And I think we all know this story. We see it every single day. This was not a lack of resources. This was not a matter of resistance. This was not a matter of anything other than when it came down to the wire of let's continue treatment, and as we all know, longer treatment terms produce better outcomes. When it came to that day of step down, nobody knew why he needed to go because all they heard up until that point was, he's doing great. So it was a huge shock. What do you mean he needs to do more treatment? We've already agreed to let him come home. And playing catch up on boundaries at that stage it was a battle that we didn't win. Now, a lot of the traditional family models that I've seen within treatment programs, go to Al-Anon, some brief psychoeducation. And what we've really tried to do with this foundation is create, what if the family became a client in their own right? Not do you enable, why do you do it? What's your attachment to the chaos? What parts of this do you miss? We find the families often the ones holding everything together. Who's all in recovery in the room? Few of us? For most of us in recovery, we have more exposure to our families than we do to the treatment providers, the therapists. They're the ones that are left to hold us accountable post-treatment. And what we found is that when we're able to really deliver targeted support to the family system that is not patient-centered, it's centered on the family members themselves, we can see AMAs decrease. We can see length of stay increase. Step-down refusals are uncommon. And naturally, outcomes improve across the board. We talked a little bit about some of the standard models we see in treatment. A couple of brief updates. Discharge planning call. Here's your plan. Here's your packet. Go to Al-Anon. Have a great day. That's most families' experience, at least what I've encountered in this industry. Where at the same time that they're getting very little interaction from the center, the patient in the program is the one calling them whenever they have phone privileges? Virtually every day. It's Groundhog Day in here. We're doing the same thing over and over again. I'm getting all better. I don't need this anymore. And throughout that entire time, the patient shapes that narrative to avoid accountability. And so when these step down and discharge planning conversations happen, that deal is already sealed before the therapist has ever even made real contact as to why more treatment might be a good idea. I call it the Tony the Tiger update. They're doing great. We can reshape that narrative into they're doing great for the stage that they're at. I'm encouraged to see participation, and we still have a long way to go. Helping these families understand or stop confusing progress with arrival. Because that's what I see over and over and over again. They hear they're doing great and they think we've arrived somewhere. It's like, well, they're doing great for a guy who's 18 days post-overdose. But that's a pretty low bar for he's ready to start his life, spread his wings, and fly. We find then that misinformation, lack of information is what leads to a lot of premature discharge or skipped aftercare. Now, I don't know how to go back. I did some consulting with a program one time, and they were having a real AMA problem. They astronomically high percentage of their clients were leaving the program earlier than was being recommended. And so we sat down and pulled up a list. Show us the last 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 AMAs you've had. Where did every one of those go? We found close to 90% of them were discharging to a family member's home that was signing off on that AMA. Where it only took a little extra accountability to improve treatment retention. How do I go back? There we go. Al-Anon, psychoeducation, fantastic. Every family should do it. I'm convinced everybody in the world should be working the 12 steps. But they do lack. You're not getting trauma specific. Nobody's helping the mother really understand what was her attachment to this. Nobody's helping the wife understand, does your codependence come from a generational trauma or generations of behavior patterns here? We're not getting ongoing clinical feedback in those. We're not getting real time, how can I support my loved one in recovery? Which leaves them to go to Google. And everybody knows how it goes with Dr. Google, right? I think the last time my wife had a hangnail, she ended up with cancer on Google. What we also see is that discharge plans are usually pretty well written when they leave the center. And at least half the families we work with never even see them. Never even see it. The discharge plan goes in the notebook, it goes somewhere else, collects dust, and very little of that is actually followed post-treatment. Where again, the family's the one that's going to hold them accountable post-treatment. They're the ones that can either push for continued care, push accountability on the discharge plan, or be misinformed. And what we find is most families, this is not out of neglect. It's not because they don't care. They're misinformed or under-resourced. So much so, we're now calling it the WFA, right? It's not an ACA or AMA, whatever verbiage you guys use, right, against medical advice, against clinical advice. We started calling it the with family advice AMA. Anybody ever have one of those patients they're not even asking to go home and their wife comes and picks them up? Again, progress cannot be confused with readiness, and that's a lot of our experience working with these families. So naturally, there's a lot of barriers, right? Especially in the treatment world. How do you get the family involved? What can you do with them, right? Where they're refusing to sign ROIs, the family's chaotic, they're overwhelming, they're reactive, they're trying to hold me accountable for their loved one's recovery. There's manipulation coming from the inside with the patient. It's spinning, shaping that narrative throughout. And then there's just not enough clinical bandwidth. How much time can we really dedicate to people who are not patients of the program? Now, towards the end, there'll be a QR code. You can actually download a toolkit that goes through a lot of this. And we tried to put together some real resources that virtually any program could implement right away. You know, some of the simpler solutions. How do we train the family chaos rather than cutting it off? At the end of a long day and you know you've got some drama coming up, what is going to motivate us to call that family and say, hey, look, we had a hard day. Here's what you can expect when you get your phone call tonight. Can we offer containment, some structured coaching, help channel that chaos? One thing that I love when programs do is they have a parallel family track that is not patient-centered. That doesn't even need an ROI if we're not talking patient information. Can we focus on family recovery? That does require a little more resources than some phone calls. But a parallel family track that is not a family session, it's your recovery, your healing, overcome the trauma, because where we discharge these people to has everything to do with how well they're going to do, or are they going to be back on our doorstep 3 months later? ROI leverage. There is some fun scripts in that toolkit I'll have at the end that you can download. Reframe what the ROI is. A lot of people don't want to sign a release because I don't want them to know. They're going to control my treatment plan. They're going to control this. ROIs are not about control. And if we can help our patients understand this, this is not about controlling your treatment. And good Lord, we are not going to divulge every little bit of your therapy with your family. Sir, you've got to understand the last memory your family has of you before coming in here was complete crisis, absolute chaos. And if I send you home to where the last real personal encounter they had with you that was outside of a structured encounter was reviving you from an overdose, taking you to an emergency room, begging and pleading you to go to treatment, I am discharging you back to active trauma. Give me some leverage. Let me talk to them. Let me communicate progress. Another script I found that's really fun getting the ROIs assigned is, hey, I believe you. Your mom is messed up. Your wife is sick. Like, they are absolutely bonkers. Sign the ROI so I can work with them too. Let me get them plugged into some resources. Let me get them healing because I don't want to send you back home to that. There's some fun scripts you can use in there. Narrative awareness, training families to understand manipulation. We're all familiar with the manipulation tactics. Hope, sympathy, or victim, guilt, fear. I either convince you I'm doing well, I convince you I'm a victim, I make you feel sorry for me, I make you feel like it's your fault, or if you continue to hold me accountable, you're going to make things worse. Those manipulation patterns are almost textbook. And very few families are aware of them. Every time I get on a call with a family and I start going through manipulation, it's like, how did you know? It's like, well, that's addiction. Like my dad used to say, we're all unique and special, just like everybody else. Some of those behavior patterns are so unbelievably textbook. Even a pamphlet about that can help families to understand what you're going to see at different stages. 10 days in, the detox meds wear off. Hey, expect you're going to see some rise in energy levels. When they know what to expect, they're going to be better at letting you do your job and holding their loved one accountable to staying in treatment. And then, of course, some AMA block support. What kind of boundaries do we need them to hold? When do we need them to hold those? A little bit of information and a little bit of prep work with these families can go a long way, especially in terms of treatment retention. Now, with the Family Recovery Foundation, we have a third-party family program. It's completely free. Anybody in the country can join. Doesn't cost a dime. We don't need an ROI. We've got a 120-day coaching program. We have a morning meditation 5 days a week. We have a grief and loss group, which we found has been a tremendously underserved space. Where do we send people when they lose a loved one? And it's clinically based, done with master's level clinicians and faith-informed family coaching. They can join in to any one group. They come for the next 12 weeks. They're going to get an entire curriculum centered around their healing. And it's easily implemented stuff into a program as well. In fact, in that download, you'll have a suggested outline. What can we do with a family program to just make it a little more engaging? Teaching boundaries, detachment, relapse prevention, emotion regulation. And we're not talking relapse prevention from their loved one. The family is not accountable for the addict's choices, for the loved one's choices, for their recovery. We're talking reactivity amongst the family members, relapse prevention for mom, for husband, for wife. And a third-party family program is able to act as a clinical extension without overloading staff. We've seen where these families have suffered a long time at the edges of care. Over and over again. The number one complaint I hear from our clients, and I've probably personally worked with somewhere to the tune of 2,000 families over my career. The number one complaint that I hear from treatment centers is a lack of attention, a lack of phone calls. I can't get anybody on the phone. I don't know what's happening in there. Now, a lot of times that can be interpreted as, I'm used to control, I'm used to crisis, I'm used to chaos, and I don't know how to handle the silence now that they're in treatment. But just a little bit of attention and information and really plugging them into real resources that they'll use. That's always been our biggest challenge to Al-Anon. It's a great program, but how do you get them to go? They go for a meeting or two and they don't like it. Very few will actually work the steps. A lot of them we send, they don't even know what the steps are, even after 5 or 6 meetings. Helping them understand what these resources are, what's available to them, why that is important for their own healing and their loved one's recovery. There was a mother I was working with, and it was a really sad story. Daughter did not go to treatment. She refused intervention, ran to dad's house. Mom and dad had a real rough breakup. They hadn't communicated in years. She goes to dad's house and he takes over all of the caring for her. But for so long, this mother was just so unbelievably wrapped up in her daughter's chaos. She had quit her job. She was out of resources. She was out of money. She had done nothing but try to control her daughter's bipolar disorder and subsequent substance use disorder for so long that even the patient's brother, this mother's son, wanted nothing to do with her anymore because he felt that he hadn't been seen for years. She comes into the program. She does the work. She ends up going back to school. She's a therapist now, 4 family members. And I'll never forget, she's sitting in one of our groups and she says, the most valuable thing I learned through this process was how to have a healthy relationship with an unhealthy daughter. And that's kind of a worst case scenario when families participate. Your average story is when the family's informed, included, educated, and supported, they do better. They do better in treatment. They stay longer. They're more likely to participate in aftercare. They'll actually know what their discharge plan is because that's our accountability system. So the Family Recovery Foundation, 501c3 nonprofit, clinically grounded, faith-informed, there for anybody free of charge. Just go to the website, sign up for the Zooms. Reflection Family Interventions, that's what my wife and I founded. And that's a much more personalized, intimate, individualized family program that sometimes starts with an intervention process. Some of the tools you'll see, a family recovery timeline. And I hope you guys actually download this and improve upon it and send it back. Send it to me. I'd love to see it. You know, this whole conference is about innovation. Can we do family programming that is not resource intensive and really dial that in? Crisis block scripts, discharge risk indicators. We all know when somebody's going to AMA, but when's the last time any of us wrote it down and actually informed their family members, this is what you're looking for? An aftercare influence map. Who's going to influence this patient on what step down looks like, what aftercare looks like? Who's the one holding them accountable? The analogy I like to use is that if you loved somebody with diabetes, chronic, often terminal disease, if you loved somebody with diabetes, some of our initial reactions would be to learn about that disease. What kind of food do I need to prepare? What do I need to have in the fridge? What are glucose levels? When do I give them a Diet Coke? When do I give them a hard candy, right? And if we found them with a chocolate cake, just wolfing the whole thing down, nobody would have any guilt ripping that cake out of their lap, throwing it in the dumpster, putting something nasty on top of it so they couldn't eat it again because we knew we had to hold them accountable to keeping their disease in check. Why can't we do the same thing with addiction? And we should be doing this. So that's what that aftercare influence map is all about. Who is going to influence this person's recovery when they leave your doors? Who's going to influence keeping them there when they need to be there? And then there's a fun narrative decoder, just helping families understand, hey, here's some things you might hear. Here's what they actually mean, and here's some suggested responses. You know, and again, I hope you guys actually download that and improve upon it. Run with it, send it back. I'd love to see it. That's about what I got on the family recovery. Do you guys have any questions?